Thanks, Ed. That's great. And thanks everyone for joining today, as Ed's already said. And thanks also to our expert panelists. So I'm going to introduce now one by one. So we've got a very good panel here lined up today, I think. Four very different people from very different backgrounds, as it were, and jobs. So it should be a very interesting session. So Rachel, you need to unmute, please, if you could.
Oh, sorry, I just assumed I'd mute while I wasn't talking. But
fine, yeah, no, it's fine. Anyway, we've got Fatima Ahmed here, who is the Road Safety Manager for London Borough of Hounslow. Fatima's already contributed to this this cycling 3-week cycling event that we're holding. She delivered a presentation called Cycling for All, in which she looked at some of the schemes they've introduced in Hounslow that have managed to increase the number of people participating in training, which was very interesting. We've got Rachel Aldred, who's Professor of Transport at Westminster University. Rachel's done a lot of work in the field of cycling. Particularly, she presented again early in this event on cycling infrastructure and how it's failing to protect cyclists in this country. So it's an interesting presentation if anyone wants to have a look at it, who hasn't already. Michael Corden is Head of Training at Cycle Confident and Bike Ride, and he's also presented during this session. His presentation was titled Great Things Happen When People Cycle, looking at all the positive spin-offs of cycling as an activity for people, method of transport. And then finally, a man who really needs no introduction at all to road safety professionals, Davies, Executive Director of PACS. You're all welcome. Thank you for joining us, making time. Thank you. Right, we've had 5 questions set in advance and a couple have come in already on the chat line. I'm going to start with one of the preset questions, if I may, by way of a loosener for everyone. And the panelists have seen these, so they've had a little bit of time to think about them. And it reads as follows. Has the pandemic been a help or a hindrance as far as the government's cycling and walking investment strategy is concerned? Now, I think the best person to start here is David Davies. David, do you have a view on this?
I think overall it has helped. I mean, we've seen the emergency funding for local lower traffic neighbourhoods, LTNs, controversial. So it hasn't all gone down well, but I think, you know, local authorities working under huge pressure, time pressures and all the rest of it have delivered. And I think a lot of that will stick. You know, pop-up cycle lanes and so forth have been converted to permanent ones. And, you know, the government has spoken out clearly in favour of healthy, active travel. So I think it will stick. And there's talk about greening, building back better, building back greener. And I think there are currents we're picking up that might indicate the government is starting to think more holistically about the importance of safety and public health and pressures on the health service. And, you know, perhaps as we've been pointing out, you know, people that have collisions and injuries go into A&E and are a pressure on the health service. So save the NHS. You know, part of it is road safety.
Yeah. So you think on balance, it's actually been a help?
Well, I mean, we'd never say that, you know, COVID has been a good thing, obviously, but some good things may come out of it.
Yeah. Anyone else on the panel want to comment on that?
I mean, I think it's encouraged people to think more carefully about how they choose to travel, especially, you know, around the guidance of trying to, you know, avoid public transport. It's actually, you know, encouraged people to think about more active modes. And I mean, you know, one thing we could do as instructors and cycle training organisations is to ensure that we offer those people support through training, if they choose to take it, to build their confidence.
Yeah.
And to try and make that choice towards an active mode stick, and have them, you know, making that choice as much as possible in the future.
Okay. Yeah.
I mean,
anyone else?
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, we've done work with our public health team around walking and cycling, kind of promoting it as one thing through the 2 avenues there. So yeah, I think definitely it's been helpful. We've seen the number of people that are attending our training has gone up, and that's, you know, people who've taken their bike out of the shed after 10 years, and that's been due to the pandemic, and people walking who've, you know, walked 10, 5 miles, 3 miles, you know, even the short trips we've seen people are doing now. So definitely, yeah. And now it needs to come with the funding to help us do the programs that we can deliver to kind of match that.
Anyone in the audience want to comment on this question before we move on? No, no one. That's fine.
There's no
Okay, so
raise hands at the moment, Nick. But I will just, because
No,
we had quite a few latecomers come in, we'll just quickly run through again how people can get involved.
Sure.
I'm
Please do.
going to miss the intro. There's two ways. You can either use the chat function at the bottom of the screen, or you can also find at the bottom of the screen the raised hand function, which will enable you to speak your question out loud.
Thanks, Ed. Okay, let's move on then. So, Ed, what? There's a couple of questions already on the chat line. Anything in there that you think we should pick up on?
Sorry, no, there isn't any questions on the chat yet.
Oh, there isn't. I thought there were. So, okay, no problem. That's fine. In that case, can I ask Councillor Vincent Stopps if he's in the house to put his question? Councillor Stopps, are you there? Make yourself known. Yes. Ed will unmute you, and then you can go, Vincent. Hello. Is he gone?
Yeah.
I'll come back to you in a minute, Vincent. He's gone. He's disappeared. Okay, let's take another one. Let's take another one of the questions that we've had in advance from other people who are not attending today. So the second question is, are we getting it right in the UK with regards to provision of cycling infrastructure? I think that's right up your street, Rachel, I would say.
Sure. Yes. No, thank you. And I would...
You can have a better one to start with, Rachel, could you?
Can you hear me okay? Just wanted to check.
Yeah.
Yes, good. Great. Yeah, no, I mean, obviously one could say a lot about this topic, but I think what the international comparisons show is that cycling in this country and walking in this country are riskier per kilometre or per hour than they are in the best European context. So, you know, cycling and walking are around 2 or 3 times safer per kilometre in the safest European countries. So, you know, clearly we need to do more. You know, I think it's good that the latest cycle infrastructure design guidance, so it represents a step change and does have those better standards, does have that better protective infrastructure in it. But, you know, clearly that isn't what most cycle infrastructure looks like. And one thing I worry about that I was going to say in response to the previous question is that we get this kind of postcode lottery, that some areas will have better infrastructure, will have better conditions for walking and cycling, you know, because they have more funding, they have more resources, more expertise, and others won't. And we see that even in London, but certainly across the country. And for instance, rural areas, smaller towns and so on, you know, need support, need resourcing, need to be able to upgrade their infrastructure substantially. So we have the guidance, you know, now, but we need to implement it.
Okay, so what you're asking for is a level playing field, effectively, where we get similar treatment and similar funding across the country.
Yes, exactly. That it needs to be seen not as an optional extra. And, you know, it's good to see an increase in funding, but compared to the amount of funding allocated to, you know, to roads, to new road building and so on, you know, it's really a relatively small amount of money. But yeah, we need the same standards, the same quality infrastructure, the same provision across the country.
Okay, great. Anyone else on the panel want to comment on that? Yeah, David?
Yeah, I'll comment if I may. I used to make a living doing slideshows. Remember those old things, slides? And that wasn't my whole living, but part of it was slideshows of bloody awful cycling infrastructure. And as Rachel says, you know, some of it in the UK has been very, very poor. You know, the idea that something is better than nothing, which it often isn't. Something obviously can sometimes often more dangerous than nothing. I think it's worth pointing out that, you know, countries like the Netherlands, which probably is the you know, is the best, have taken a long time to develop it. And it doesn't happen quickly. And I'm in London, and I remember back in the 80s when the London Cycling Campaign was campaigning for infrastructure and boroughs were developing their own networks, and it's taken, you know, 40 years, frankly, to sort of get to the standard, and also the willingness to take out parking, to do the difficult stuff. Because it's, you know, it's not just about designing it; it's about, you know, local politicians being brave enough to say, yeah, we will, you know, bite the bullet and bring in the sort of difficult side of it, rather than just shove cyclists on the pavement, which has happened so very often. So, you know, we are PACS, as much as we have a particular policy on it, we are not in favour of mandatory use for cyclists of cycle infrastructure, because, you know, sometimes it's just awful, and it would be, you know, less safe and less convenient.
Yeah. Right. I think Councillor Stopps has posted, because it relates to this actually. I think Councillor Stopps has posted his question on the chat line. So could we take that now, because it does relate to this particular question. So Ed, do you want to read it out, please?
Yeah. So the question is many cycle lanes and tracks are being introduced that stop short of junctions. Does this not just leave cyclists in a vulnerable, less visible position on the road as they pass through the intersection? How is that safe?
Right. Okay. Who wants to have a go at that one?
I answered it in the chat, but I'll say it as well. And yes, it's really important to improve cycle infrastructure at junctions. And this is one of the reasons why we need this funding, better funding, because this is often the expensive bit. It's also the bit where political will, the willingness to take space away from motor vehicles is often also important, as David was just saying about, reallocating car lanes. Very often our junctions are designed so we have maximum approach lanes for motor traffic, and we need to take that space, and reallocate it to pedestrians and cyclists. So it's a question of funding and of political will, I think. But yes, obviously it's very important.
So what you're saying is that what Councillor Vincent Young has said is actually true, and it's not. Vincent Stopps has said it's not safe. Michael, did you want to pick up on something there?
Yeah, no, just I mean, I think it's something I mentioned in my presentation, and it is simply, and it relates to Councillor Stopps' question, is that infrastructure can be absolutely fantastic, but it's not going to go to everybody's doorstep. So, if it stops short, it doesn't get to the doorsteps. People still need to negotiate their way towards that infrastructure if they want to use it. So, that would be my case for arguing for, cycle training for anybody who wants it.
Yeah.
So that we can equip people with the skills to get themselves to the infrastructure, and increasingly how to use that infrastructure as it becomes busier and busier.
Yeah. Good point. Thank you. Anyone else in the audience want to come back on this one before we move on to another point? Another question? No, we've done that one. We're happy with that. Good. Ed, what's on? I see there's been several entries recently on the chat line. Going to pick one out for us?
Yeah, we have a question from Stephen Nye, who says, how do the panel view the potential introduction of e-scooters to our roads beyond the current pilot schemes? Do they pose a risk to cyclists? Are there mixed messages around safety, given helmets are unlikely to be used by e-scooter riders? And finally, should they be allowed on cycle paths?
Okay, a fair bit to get into there. I think it's a related topic, but it is genuinely related to cyclists. I think we can take it, and there's no problem at all. David, did you want to comment on that?
Yeah, I mean, we are trying not to obsess about the issue of e-scooters at the moment, but I've just come off a call from a Daily Mail reporter wanting yet another comment. It is a new issue, and I think just because they have two wheels does not mean they are the same as bicycles, or their safety features are the same as bicycles. And I think we've got to study it. I mean, in a nutshell, my view is that there's not a particular problem with them using cycle tracks, cycle lanes, and so forth. They shouldn't be on the pavement. I sort of believe that. I'm prepared to believe that well-specified and well-managed rental schemes can operate reasonably safely, but what we have is about 500,000 privately owned scooters out there being used completely illegally, and the police are doing the best they can in a difficult situation. We've had 4 deaths that we know of. There's a 55-year-old man critically ill in Newcastle who, we hope he pulled through, but it's touch and go, and it's a different issue to cyclists, because on an e-scooter you tend to get pitched forward, and you're just thrown from the scooter, whereas cyclists' bigger hazard is being hit by a motor vehicle. It is. I think we need to differentiate between different types of micromobility.
Yeah. Anyone else got any views on that? Everyone comfortable with David's suggestion that we're okay with e-scooters in cycle lanes or not?
Yeah, I'm sort of okay with it. I mean, our position on it is basically where they can contribute to, lower car use and better air quality, then that's a good thing. I mean, I've ridden them, and they are not like riding a bike. They're quite difficult to control in that sense. They're quite difficult to ride one-handed. So, communicating your intentions as a road user is not as easy as on a bicycle. And of course, it's not active travel as far as, I can see. You're standing still effectively. At least you're standing up, that's one thing. But it's relatively passive mode.
Yeah. Okay. Good. Right. Ed, back to the chat line. I see it's quite lively now. What are you going to pick out next?
Yeah, we'll take a question from Keith Irving. He says, how important will the likely highway code changes be for cycling and pedestrian safety, especially a new hierarchy of users and giving way at junctions?
So this is a question about the review of the highway code that's going on, yeah, at the moment. And anyone got any views on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think hopefully it should be a positive development. I mean, it's giving way, making it clear that drivers who are turning into a side road have to give way to pedestrians or cyclists continuing straight on. I mean, technically that should already be happening, but very often it isn't. I mean, I think it has to go alongside making sure that these prioritizations in the highway code are also make their way through into road design as well, so that, for instance, side road junctions are not flared. They are designed to give continuous footways and so on that indicate that pedestrians and cyclists have priority, as well as the rule being strengthened. So yes, I think it's hopefully a positive development, but we also need to see road design and enforcement changes in line with that.
Yeah. Anyone else on the panel got a view on that?
I have a very simple view on that, and that is that those changes are communicated effectively, so that all road users are aware of them and put them into practice. Yeah,
because the danger is otherwise that. Sorry, someone else going to say something? Did I chip in?
No, I agree with Rachel and Michael. The reality is that most drivers don't read the highway code after they've passed, or in fact even many of them seem to be able to pass without reading it, just use the crib sheets. And realistically, they don't pick up on changes, so it's got to be communicated well and much more effectively if it's reinforced through road design, markings, junctions, that sort of stuff. I have some qualms about the hierarchy concept. I think it's absolutely right to emphasise that people in more dangerous vehicles have more responsibility, but I think putting everything into a hierarchy starts to get a bit tricky, about exactly where you are in the hierarchy, and also what hierarchy means. Is it importance? Is it safety? Is it responsibility? Is it vulnerability? Anyway, we will see where the government's going with it.
Yeah, good. Okay, thanks for that. I'm really keen to get someone to raise their hand. I'd really like to have a real person ask a question rather than to pick up questions on the chat lines. Anyone going to be brave enough? There must be someone out there who's going to actually raise their hand and ask a question in person, because I'm not going to go on until someone does. No, I don't mean that, but I'm going to sit here for a minute or two or a second or two just to see if someone's going to do it. Anyone prepared to raise their hand? Dave?
I've got one. Dave Holiday.
Okay, Dave. Hello, Dave. How are you? You need to unmute.
Am I now clear? Right.
Yeah, you are. Yeah, hear you loud and clear.
Okay, sitting here in Glasgow. I was going to raise something. Two councils, I put it in the chat, two councils, as far as I'm aware, have actually closed their road safety departments and opened a road danger or road hazard management department instead. I've got a passion for dealing with Section 39. Are people aware of Section 39 of the Road Traffic Act?
Yeah.
But basically, the councils are required to investigate crashes and incidents that happen. And then, it's almost in marking their own homework, they then tell themselves what to do to stop crashes. Whereas in all other transport situations, rail crashes are investigated by a professional investigation body, which publishes crash reports from which everybody can learn. And then that's passed to a regulator who then tells the operators of the infrastructure of vehicles what is expected of them to prevent future crashes. Whereas that's sort of broken in the roads industry. We don't have a highways accident investigation section. As far as I'm aware, City of London and Lambeth have moved away from looking at road safety. And as an engineer in risk management, if you remove the hazard, you don't need the PPE. So in risk management, the aim is to remove the hazard as the ultimate aim. And when you tell people they've got to put on high vis and helmets and protective equipment, you've actually failed to remove the hazard.
Okay. So Dave, what's your question? Dave, what's your question for the panel, please?
Well, can we move away from sort of telling people to put safety gear on and actually looking at investigating crashes? Vernon Place, 2 deaths in 5 years, a left turn, full lock, tight radius corner, where in order to take the left turn, the drivers of the trucks have to pull over to the right-hand side and force their way through the left-hand lane.
So what you're advocating is more focus on collision investigation rather than telling people how to stay safe. Is that correct?
I think that, yeah, objective, remove the hazard at Bow flyover. 50% of people ride over the flyover because that cuts out 6 places where someone can drive through you on the CS2.
Okay, Dave.
Faster.
Thanks for that. Anyone on the panel want to come back on Dave's comment there about collision investigation and the importance of it and the way that we're doing it within road safety compared with other sectors, travel sectors? Dave, David, sorry.
Sure. Dave, good to hear from you again. We are a Passenger Transport Safety Organisation, so we do see what happens in air accident investigation and rail accident investigation, and they do, as Dave says, have independent accident investigation branches with powers, with resources. We don't have that in roads, and we very much support that idea. In credit to the government, they are funding, as are other people at Highways England, a road collision investigation project, which the RAC Foundation is running. And I think it's a really exciting project. And the output from that is whether they can come up with a business case for some sort of road collision investigation branch, or whatever we call it, highways. And I think that is likely. You know, there has been a traditional view that, well, the police investigate fatalities and the local authority investigates others, and it's adequately covered. And anyway, there's hundreds of thousands of road crashes, so you couldn't do it as you do in rail and air. But I think some sort of sensible compromise will be arrived at, and there will be real learning. Good.
Great. Okay, Dave, thanks very much for being brave enough to be the first person to put his hand up. That's very good of you, and we're going to move on now, if that's okay. Anyone else got a question in the audience they want to put to the panel by raising their hand? No? Okay. Ed, can you pick up something from the chat line, please?
There's just a comment that's just come, which says, in general, road safety engineering looks at patterns of crashes and aims to remove the hazards causing the crashes. Road safety education helps people move around safely. A good blend of approaches needed, I think.
Yeah, that's a fair comment. I think that's a very reasonable comment from a road safety officer, I guess. But yeah, that's good. Right, any more questions, Ed, on the chat line?
There's a question from Keith Baldock, which I'll just read. He says, given that cycle lane standards have significantly improved since some tokenistic narrow runs were introduced to give some infrastructure previously, now that 20 mile an hour limits exist, would it be better to remove these? I'm guessing he's talking about the older infrastructure, even if there's no immediate possibility of providing better separated infrastructure.
So what Keith is suggesting there is that 20 mile an hour does away with the need for segregated cycling infrastructure. Anyone got a view on that? I think, Keith, sorry if I've misinterpreted that, but I think that's broadly what you're saying. Anyone got a view on that?
I didn't think he was saying that, but I would say if he is, I would say that doesn't necessarily follow that where you have high volumes of motor traffic, then the fact that the limit is 20 miles an hour doesn't mean that it's safe and pleasant to share space as a cyclist. But the point about removing infrastructure, I think, is an interesting one, because, where you're talking about substandard cycle lanes that potentially may put cyclists at greater risk, they go under parked cars, they put people in the door zone and so on. That infrastructure is not infrastructure that we would put in now, rightly so. But I guess my focus would probably be, rather than on removing stuff, would be putting new good stuff in. So I would, if there's a question of where you concentrate your efforts, I would say I would put it more in terms of putting in good stuff rather than removing things. But I agree, you wouldn't put that kind of infrastructure in there. I hope you wouldn't.
Thank you. My rather crude interpretation of Keith's question has forced him to raise his hand and clarify himself, I think. So Keith, welcome to the session.
Thanks, Nick.
You want to clarify?
Rachel was effectively summarised what I was trying to say, and it is particularly of concern where we've got lots of side roads and lots of intersections, crossings, etc. It's the casualty rate that's very high, and it's the political difficulty of removing something that is, from my perspective anyway, causing many more collisions than it should happen if it was a 20-mile-an-hour road and everyone was expecting cyclists to take the mid version as opposed to being encouraged to take a narrow cycle lane at the edge of the kind of curb, basically. So I think it's very difficult politically to take out those kind of cycle lanes.
Yeah, thanks, Keith. Thanks for that. Michael?
I just had an observation, really. I think the 20-mile-an-hour speed limits are fine if they're enforced. I live in southeast London, and there's a road at the bottom of my road where there used to be a 20-mile-an-hour speed limit, and there still is. It wasn't enforced, but what they've done there is to re-engineer the road and put in a specific bollarded off cycle lane. They've narrowed the road on one side and done that. On the other side, they've built some proper infrastructure, quite a wide cycle lane. That has slowed down the traffic considerably. So now at the end of my road, I've got quite a busy road leading up to Crystal Palace, but it's got a full segregated cycle lane on one side, bollarded on the other, and the traffic speed has come down significantly.
Anyone else want to comment on this point? Keith, are you happy we've answered your question?
Oh, yeah, it is the thing. I think there should be some intermediate where you've got an urban road, basically. We're expecting cyclists in a 20-mile-an-hour road area to be in the middle of the road, and trying to encourage that, because we to put all the infrastructure in, we simply, one, there isn't the space immediately, and two, there certainly isn't the funding.
No. Yeah. Okay, Keith, thanks very much for raising that point. That's a good point. Anyone else want to raise their hand? Nick Hughes, I think, has raised his hand. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct.
Nick? Hello, Nick.
Hello, good morning. It was just a comment about 20-mile-an-hour and enforcement. We get a lot of requests for 20-mile-an-hour speed limits when, in effect, people wanting 20-mile-an-hour speed, and that to me is very different. Putting a sign up doesn't reduce the speeds. Engineering speeds down to 20 mile an hour is way beyond, to me, the budget of county councils, highway authorities around the country on any significant proportion of their road network. Enforcement works while they're sat there, potentially, but it's still even giving tickets away when they're sat there, so it doesn't work permanently. So, putting a 20-mile sign up has to be accompanied by engineering, or on the existing roads where the speeds are already 20 miles an hour. So it's a bit of a catch-22 in a way, with present ways of, or the ability for us to change environment significantly.
Yeah.
That was my comment. Thank you.
Thanks, Nick. Thank you. Anyone want to add to that, David?
Yeah, I totally agree with what Nick says. There is some glimmer of hope, though, which is the European Union, or member states in the European Union, when UK was a member, agreed to the general safety regulation. So this is changes to vehicle safety standards, which will come into effect in 2022. And one of the key ones in that is ISA, Intelligent Speed Assistance. So it's not mandatory, but it will remind drivers, at least remind drivers of what the speed limit is, and it can be set to mandatory. We desperately need our government now to legislate that into UK law. Otherwise, we'll be out of step with Europe. It won't be good for our vehicle manufacturers. Those in Northern Ireland, they'll have to comply with those standards anyway. But for safety purposes, and it's very interesting how, like Welsh government, which is planning to introduce 20 miles an hour as a default in, I think, 2022, is looking to things like the general safety regulation to make it work.
Yeah. Yeah. Nick, did you want to come back on this?
Yes, I mean, that is the holy grail. Cars basically will not be naughty, in effect. And I think I have seen, there has been some research on how long it's going to take the vehicle stock to be upgraded, where that makes a significant difference. I've just been lucky enough to get a newish car that's got adaptive cruise control, and that's absolutely brilliant. But it's still got that override facility where you can turn it off and you can turn your ISA off at the moment. So how long before that actually makes a significant difference, do you think?
Well, I suppose looking at it positively, if a certain percentage of vehicles comply, then that will have a calming effect on others. And in London now, we've got buses with mandatory ISA, so they are sticking into the speed limit, 20 miles an hour speed limit, without any driver choice. But you're right, we'll see. I don't know.
Good. Okay, thanks very much. I'm going to move on to another topic, if that's okay. Thanks, Nick, for your contribution there. That was great. I've got a question here that has been said in advance that I think is worth reading, worth bringing in at this stage, and that is a simple question. Is there any research which confirms that cycle training reduces collisions and casualties among cyclists? Now, I think that, Michael, you were keen to address this one.
Yeah, thank you. Good question. So my immediate port of call for this was the Bikeability Trust. So I got in touch with Benjamin Smith last night, and he sort of told me that there are no studies which directly address this question that he knows of. Yeah. But a few years ago, the Bikeability Trust put together a thing called the Bikeability Hazard Perception Report. And that is some research into the impact of bikeability training on children's ability to perceive and appropriately respond to hazards when cycling on the road.
Okay.
Which I think is a good, I mean, you know, I read that a few years ago, and it's a good report. And, you know, there's a couple of helpful highlights from the conclusion. That concludes that, you know, children who were involved in an online screen quiz around hazard perception scored significantly higher than children who hadn't taken the bikeability training. So I think that that, you know, the raising their awareness of hazards is a positive thing, and it also, you know, you can monitor people's hazard perception and appropriate responses to that. And analysis from that report shows that there is statistically a significant positive association between the training and their confidence when cycling.
Rachel, can I ask you a question as a researcher and academic? Because we had this very same question came up in the Powered Two-Wheeler question time session we had. And the answer given back at that was it's very difficult to actually produce a study that looks at this whole. So would it be difficult to actually do a study that looked at whether or not cycle training had an adverse or positive effect on casualties and collisions?
Simple answer, yes, it would. And I've been asked about this as well. I mean, also the important thing would be to look at risk as well, not just the number, just to point out, you know, because if people were cycling twice as much and collisions went up 20%, then obviously you've got a reduction in risk. So you would need to look at that as well. But I also, I've also been asked about whether you could look at whether having cycle training as a child made it less likely that you would be involved in a collision with a cyclist as a driver, and that is also quite difficult to look at. So there are studies looking at these proxies, but you know, obviously we don't necessarily know whether better performance on a test on screen necessarily translates into behaviour on the road.
Because it would be a really good thing to know, wouldn't it, if it was possible to know it? I mean, it would be great for Michael, well, for everyone involved in safety, road safety, really, but to prove the link in. Sorry, yeah, go on, Rachel.
I would say I think cycle training success, you know, should be more around, you know, that it's people, children learning a really useful skill, that they enjoy it, that hopefully they maybe do it more. I think that if we're thinking about reducing road danger, then we're thinking about road design, we're thinking about the behaviour of motorists to a greater extent, to be honest.
Okay. Yeah. No? Okay, that was a good question. Thank you very much. And Ed, is there anyone want to raise their hand, first of all, before we go back to the chat line as a second resort, basically? Anyone brave enough to come forward and ask another question by raising their hand in person?
Yeah, we have a raised hand from Faye Goodman, so I would just go, Faye.
Hi, Faye. How are you?
I'm fine, thanks, Ed. How are you?
Good. Nice to hear from you.
Yeah, nice to see you all, and great subject matter. So really enjoying the debate. As Ed knows, I do a lot of work in children's road safety, and I'm really particularly interested to know what the panel's views are on obviously educating and training children under 8. I know that we'd stated that children usually become more savvy, more aware of road safety at the age 8 upwards. But my sort of feeling is surely if we can do more, which is what we're trying to do, for younger children, even at the age of 3 and 4, I have a little 3-year-old, you know, trying to encourage when they're on their bike, how we make them more safe and aware of what's going on. So dependent on where they live, they don't rush into the road on their bike thinking it's a play area. So I'm just keen to know what your views would be, please. Thank you.
Fatima, you've been very quiet. You got a view on this one?
I think, I mean, it is all down to, I mean, it's like the pedestrian training. We've increased that. We used to deliver it to receptionists, but we did move it to the year 3 and 4. And I think, again, with bikeability, it is aimed at the right year group. We do bring some work around year 4, trying to reduce it to that. But again, it's about the skills that they need to learn about how to manage the bike and be a bit confident on the bike, but not necessarily, I think, about traveling on, you know, on the road on their own. But if they were with their parents, of how they cycle. So we've done cycle training around parents cycling with children for the younger group.
Age 8 or 9, is that right? Age
Yeah.
8 or 9, yeah.
Yeah, 8 and 9, yeah, year 4.
Faye's talking about is much younger children and giving them.
Yeah, so we've done something similar to that, where we've done parents cycling with children,
okay,
and training together as a family.
Yeah. Michael, you got a view on this?
Yeah, I mean, I've done quite a bit of work with, you know, children under 8 in the past, and it's been sort of focused on pedestrian training and also scooter training. So it's about younger people learning to use the pavements and actually being aware of the hazards that are involved in using the pavements, and then making some decisions around that. I think Fatima's got a great point about involving parents in that training, because that just helps us to get across those sort of hazard awareness messages to parents and children, and then the parents will sort of embed those messages. And really importantly for me, if we can involve the parents, then we're sharing the knowledge and skills with the parents and families, rather than just coming in as a group of instructors or tutors or whatever, and just, you know, making an intervention once or twice a year.
Yeah,
I think if we can embed that knowledge in the communities, that will be beneficial for everybody.
So Faye, do you want to come back on any points there?
Yes, no, it's thank you for those comments. It's just that, yeah, I do have some views on what obviously we're doing with regards to helping young children that are aged, you know, three upwards. So yeah, I mean, it would be great if I can maybe converse with the panelists at some future date to share what we're doing, if that would be helpful, because I think it's about reaching a wider audience, and how we can work together to ensure that children do become safe in all areas, especially when they're starting to be on a bike, or you know, walking back to school. These are all key areas that obviously we're very passionate about. Thank you.
Thanks, Faye. Thanks, and thanks for the work that you do. I know you do a lot of good work and put time and resources into road safety. So thanks on everyone's behalf for that work that you do.
Thank you.
Nick, could I just say something, actually picking up on both that and on the question asked by Nick? So talking about children not rushing into the road like it's a play area, I mean, obviously that is an important issue that people have been discussing, but I would also like to raise the point that maybe some streets, at least at some times, should be more like play areas, and that this would be a benefit for our children. And I'm thinking about, for instance, school streets, whereby there's a lot of school streets that have been implemented where I live, and you see, as you go out onto the street, you see as the school run is about to start, children playing on the street outside the school, and I think that is a positive development. So let's not forget road design and the way in which we can make our streets more welcoming for all users.
Yeah, there would be, and I'm going to play devil's advocate here, if that's okay, just for a second, because there would be people that would argue that actually streets are dangerous and roads are dangerous, and encouraging children to play in them is not actually something that necessarily, I'm not saying this is my view, but there are people that would argue that. But I guess there must be research done to prove that actually having school streets and the like is making an overall contribution to safety.
Well, as we know, the reason that roads are dangerous is predominantly motor vehicles, volume, speeds of motor vehicles and so on. So the school streets, because they remove virtually all the motor vehicles around the school, they make those streets quite a bit safer. We have also been doing some research along these lines, which is in progress.
Yeah, good, thank you.
I mean, I think the other thing about,
go on,
sorry.
go on, David. Sorry.
David first, and then Michael, please.
Okay, I think the other thing about school streets is a lot of them are being implemented not for safety purposes, particularly, but more for air quality. And actually, relatively few casualties take place close to the school. So this is where the sort of idea of having 20-mile-an-hour zones around schools has rather limited benefits, because it's often not there that the collisions and casualties take place. The only other thing I say about education is I'm sure it does have a role to play, but it's got to be based on the cognitive abilities of the children and not expect things of them which are frankly just not feasible.
Yeah, no, very good point. Michael?
No, I 100% agree with Rachel on this, and I'll just, hark back to what Nick Chamberlain was talking about in his presentation. We really need to make our streets available to our children. I'm 57. When I was a kid, I just wandered around it. I was able to roam. I was free to roam as a child, and I discovered a lot about the world being able to do that. And if our children aren't free to roam around, then that can't be a good thing. So we've just got to work towards making our streets safe for them to, to be able to be on, basically.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Ed, there's a lot of conversation on the chat line. Is there anything in there that's caught your eye that you think we should bring in at this point, question-wise?
I'll just read a comment on the subject from Andy Ford, who said, sorry, somebody else has just been. Our pedestrian training in Oxfordshire is a programme called Footsteps, and is aimed at parents giving them guidance on how to be a role model and engage their children in becoming safer when they become more independent. Yeah,
okay. Yeah, thank you. Thanks. I hope you don't mind that we're touching on subjects that don't strictly fall within the cycling umbrella, but it's interesting that these are related topics that are coming out in this discussion. Anyone else want to raise their hand and ask a question to the audience, to the panelists at this stage? No? No raised hands? Got a couple of other preset questions here that I can go to, so I'm going to go to one now. This is about cycle training, and I guess Fatima and Michael are probably the two people this is probably most appropriate for. How can we get more people to sign up for cycle training, particularly those from areas of deprivation and ethnic communities? Fatima, you must have experience in this area.
Yeah, I mean, we've done exactly that in Hounslow in the last 4 years. And I think we've taken cycle training to our community groups and put them out, all our community cycling hubs dotted throughout the borough are in areas where there's high deprivation and where there's high ethnic minority communities, and again, it's all about the engagement that you have with your community groups through the work that we've done, and a lot of word of mouth then gets out that we're running cycle training. The fact that it's in a park, people are coming for other using the park for other things, and then you have a presence of cycling within the areas. People riding around, the people who are on led rides or training will then be promoting the work that the council is doing. So we've done a lot around that and worked with community leaders and have ambassadors within from those communities who've really taken that kind of forward for us.
Can you just give us a flavour of the success you've had in attracting people to the courses?
Well, I would say that people who attend our training sessions, 80% I would say, are from ethnic minority communities and predominantly women. And we know that across the range that it is women that attend more of the cycle training. So the new hub that we've set up in Hanworth is around high deprivation area, and where we know that the number of people cycling is extremely low. So we're looking at putting that in place. We've taken a lot of the barriers around bookings, providing bikes there, and people just as a kind of a drop-in session. Our doctor bikes that we offer again on a regular basis promote all the other offers, all the other activities that we're running in Hounslow, has kind of helped quite a lot. And again, the imagery that we've used in our promotional materials has been reflective of the communities that we're trying to get on those training courses.
And am I right in thinking without bigging you up too much, that you've gone from being one of the worst London boroughs for attracting people to cycling training to one of the best?
Yes, I think so.
And
Yes, you know, that was in the TfL's cycle skills portal, which I did share in my presentation, that we didn't rank anywhere, and then within 2 years we were #1 on the TfL's portal in terms of our expectations, the numbers that we'd trained.
Yeah, excellent. That's really good to hear.
Yeah.
Michael, did you want to come in on this question?
No, only to say congratulations to Fatima, because that is a fantastic achievement down in Hounslow. And in fact, I was chair of the judges on the London Road Safety Council when you won that award, Fatima, from them. So really,
Yes.
really great. I had a really good look at that. I mean, you know, from our point of view, what we've tried to do over the years is just to work with local groups, and specifically, we've been working with Cycle Sisters and Hornboom Joyriders for 4 or 5 years now. And we alluded to this earlier. What we do is we engage with that group of cyclists and give them the skills to build up their own groups. So, for instance, with Cycle Sisters, we train VEB volunteers to become instructors. Yeah. We also offer ride leader training to them, so that actually, instead of us going in and putting in an intervention, we put the skills into their community. And they started out in Waltham Forest a few years ago. They're building up areas of activity. They're quite sort of hyper local areas, but they are now spreading around London. And those little local areas are going to join up sooner or later, and that will create more of a big shift. So I think, that's what we aim to do. And I think, again, what Fatima alluded to with regard to promotional material, that is really important, so that people who you're trying to reach out to see themselves in the promotional material. And I know, the Bikeability Trust are making a massive effort with this at the moment, aiming for, more diversity, and also working in partnerships to increase the funding available for to disabled groups. So it's there is a huge focus on it, and if we can look to what Hounslow have achieved, we can definitely take some great learning from there and take it forward.
Yeah. Hounslow's just signed up to Cycle Sisters literally in the bike week, so in June, and already we've got 50 participants that have signed up. So we've not even been in a month. Women that have signed up, and they're not necessarily just from Hounslow. So as far as Slough, people are coming, to our Sunday rides. So I'm also one of the ride leaders for Cycle Sisters, and it's amazing to see that people think, oh, I should have known about this group before, but I'm so glad it's here. So those Cycle Sisters definitely is making impact in London. It's now in 8 boroughs, and it's looking to grow. So if there is a borough out there that would like to be part of that, then all they need to do is get in touch with Cycle Sisters.
Yeah, here. So it's 4 or 5 years, Fatima. There's going to be a critical mass sooner or later, and it's just going to get brilliant.
What about the provision of bikes themselves for people to ride? Is that an important part of the program, what you do, or not necessary?
I think if you're looking to attract complete beginners to get to your to where you're training, you can't expect them to bring a bike. They just at that, not competent. So by providing bikes for the sessions, you are taking away a lot of those barriers, and people will definitely come to the sessions. So we do provide bikes at all our hubs, and also we're working with the National Trust at Osterley, who've allowing us to use their bikes free from their hire scheme.
That's fascinating. Thanks very much, Fatima, for that insight into the work you've done there. That's terrific. Right, we've got 10 minutes left, guys. So if you want to ask a question, we're getting almost to the point of no return. So, anyone got a question they want to ask by raising their hand, first of all?
We have got one in the chat, Nick, which I can go to.
Yeah, thank you, Ed.
This is a question from Rob Wiltshire. He says, if cycling is to be treated as a serious alternative form of transport, what do the panel feel about registration of bikes or riders in some way, whether it be with number plates for bikes, registration of some form, etc., etc.?
Right, so there you go, chaps. There's one to get your teeth into. Who's going to have a go at that one first? Do we need to have a licensing system for cyclists, David?
I've been asked this before. I don't think there's any country in the world, possibly North Korea, I'm not sure, but certainly no democracy that I know of where this is required. And I think we gave up dog licenses years ago and radio licenses and all sorts of stuff, and I think it's not feasible. I think the issue is cropping up over e-scooters, but I'd be surprised if it will stick there. So I don't think it's a good idea, because I think it's, first of all, not practical, and secondly, I don't think it might deter some people.
Yeah,
it's just better ways of spending your money.
Yeah. Anyone on the panel actually think there's any merit at all in the idea of licensing for cyclists? No. Okay, so we kick that one right into the long grass then straight away, no problem. Sorry about that. Nick Hughes. Sorry, Nick hasn't raised his hand as he's coming in the chat line. Anything else on the chat line you want to pick up, Ed?
I'll just pick up a question from Tamsin Constable, who says, should local authority road safety education departments, especially areas that focus on vulnerable road users, be consigned to history?
Can you read that again?
So it says, should local authority road safety education departments, especially areas that focus on vulnerable road users, be consigned to history?
What a strange question. Have you on that?
I think I maybe understand what Tamsin's getting at, though maybe it would be useful for her to ask it. But I was talking earlier about Vision Zero, and one of the pillars of Vision Zero is the idea that you don't focus on education, that you focus on making the system safe, so that even if people make mistakes, as they always will, you don't get those bad outcomes. So that education is seen as less important than road design and enforcement. So I think maybe that's what she's getting at. She does want to speak, so let me shut up.
Here right now. So Tamsin, hi, how are you?
Hello, very well, thank you, thanks. I do understand. I think my worry, department.
Sorry, we can't hear you.
Please.
I can't understand what you're saying. Sorry.
Hear me at all?
No, I don't think we can't.
Can you hear me at all?
We'll give up on that one.
Yeah, no, that's not. There's no sound volume in there. Anyone want to comment on what Tamsin said originally? Again, David.
Well, I think Tamsin's getting at this whole point about do we blame the victims, do we blame vulnerable road users and tell them to be safe, or do we focus more on danger reduction? And some people think road safety actually is a dirty term, a dirty word, two words. And I don't go along with that, because I think more progressive, more thoughtful road safety departments are delivering road danger reduction, and the safe system is about danger reduction. So I don't really see it as a conflict. But I think some of the old stuff, which was all about wear your helmet, wear reflective gear, be careful. I mean, I used to work at Birmingham City Council, and I'm sorry to say my colleagues there, when I was there, produced this leaflet aimed at elderly pedestrians saying, don't step in the high street. And you thought, is that really the message?
Yeah.
I think we moved away from that.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Anyone else with a comment? Fatima. Not I'm putting you on the spot.
No.
Should road safety education department be expanded?
Yeah. So as a pedestrian, I'm a driver, I'm a cyclist. We're all sharing that space, and it's about that message that needs to go out, that you can be one or the other, but again, yeah, it's a share of space and being courteous to each other. And I think education, it all plays a part in that, as well as enforcement and engineering.
Okay, yeah, thank you.
We have just had a couple of additional comments on the chat from Tamsin, so we'll just quickly read those. She says, my fear is that road safety education makes things worse by distracting us, which inadvertently makes things worse.
Okay, yeah, okay, I understand. I think I understand the point that's being made there, yeah. But anyway, we've done that one quite well today. Dave, I know you've got your raised hand now. Really, I'm going to give you 30 seconds to ask a question. Is that okay, Dave Holiday? Because you've had one go, and really 30 seconds, because we've got 4 minutes to go, and I don't want to. Over to you, Dave. 30 seconds.
Okay, well, the point that David Davis and Rachel were picking up on, we want right side failure. If something goes wrong, you end up safe. If something, we design stuff so The thing that's quite interesting, the number of people killed by drivers on footways, we don't try and contain the vehicles on the carriageway. And that's an issue that we ought to be looking at. How can we contain motor vehicles on carriageways?
Okay, thanks, Dave. Thanks for that. Anyone want to comment on that? No? Right, okay. Well, thanks, Dave, for the contribution anyway. Right, okay. Ed, is there anything else on the chat line? If not, I'm going to call this session to a close 2 minutes early if necessary. So, Ed, you're muted.
Sorry, nothing else to add.
Schoolboy error, Ed. Schoolboy error.
Oh, 56 minutes in first time.
Yeah. Right. Has anyone got anything else they want to say? Because otherwise, I'm going to call the session to a close 2 minutes early. So, no other points. Hold your hand up now, or forever hold your peace, as they say. No, okay, that's great. Well, look, thanks ever so much, everyone. It's been a really good session. It's flown by for me. I hope it's the same for you.